Perfectionism is a life of forever walking on eggshells. Every decision, every outcome, every piece of feedback lives in make it or break it territory because you desperately crave the validation of getting it 100% right. If that sounds like an exhausting way to exist, trust me, I know. I've lived it for years. The endless need to check every box and optimize every last detail slowly drained me of creative energy, confidence, and the ability to feel genuinely proud of my hard work. Today, I want to talk to you about 4 signs that can help you figure out if you too are a perfectionist. When we become aware of these unhelpful tendencies, then we can start to replace them with healthier practices rooted in self-compassion and grace. You know, as perfectionists, we have this tendency to set these crazy high standards for ourselves. Standards that are honestly pretty unrealistic and unattainable. No matter how well we perform or what we achieve, there's always this lingering sense of dissatisfaction. Like the success is never quite enough. One time in particular that really stands out. My boss was giving me all this praise for leading this huge high-stakes project that was a massive success. Instead of feeling proud of the overall big win and my team's hard work, I totally drained all the joy and satisfaction by nitpicking those little imperfect details. I was just chipping away at my own self-worth and sense of achievement. It was then that I realized I needed to start practicing some self-talk. I know it probably sounds a bit silly, but I started having these little affirmation mantras ready to go, reminding myself to stay proud, even if things weren't 100% flawless. These days, one of my core beliefs is that having solid standards is about consistently showing up and doing your best work. It's about embracing the journey of constant growth and iteration over time. Don't get me wrong. Adjusting my expectations around this has been huge for my self-esteem, motivation, life satisfaction, all of it. But I'm also keeping it real with myself that this is always going to be an ongoing practice. I'll always be a work in progress. And that's more than okay. As perfectionists, we can get so hung up on every little detail. I remember countless nights burning the midnight oil, just obsessively scrutinizing things that most people wouldn't even notice. I was so determined to optimize and improve until my work was perfect that I would lose track of so much precious time. Hours upon hours wasted making tiny edits and tweaks that didn't actually improve the overall quality at all. It wasn't until I found myself constantly saying, I don't have time for the people I love most that I realized by obsessing over perfecting every single detail, I was actually stealing time away from what truly mattered. That was my wake-up call. I knew I had to make a change. So I started implementing these red line deadlines for my work, a firm cutoff where I had to call it done and move on. No more tweaking allowed. And you know what? The more I practiced, the more I understood that perfect is honestly the enemy of good, even great work. At a certain point, those marginal gains from nitpicking details just diminish so quickly. I'll always have a bit of that detail-obsessing tendency in me, but implementing those time boxes and reframing what quality really looks like has been such a game changer for my productivity and my mindset. I had so many big goals, dreams, ambitious ideas that I just never brought to life because the prospect of not being able to execute them perfectly filled me with so much anxiety. My life was honestly just littered with these incomplete projects, abandoned hobbies, goals that fell by the wayside, all because I was paralyzed by visions of them not living up to my impossibly high standards. It wasn't until after my cancer diagnosis that I finally got fed up with how much of my potential I was leaving on the table and how many opportunities I was just letting pass me by. That's when I started really leaning into self-love practices, journaling, and slowly working on detaching my self-worth from any single outcome or accomplishment. These days, I try to approach every endeavor as an iterative work in progress, rather than this all or nothing undertaking where it has to be perfect right out of the gate. My new mantra is, done is better than perfect. I'd honestly rather have imperfect pieces of me and my work out in the world than a lifetime of regrets over what I sacrificed to the pursuit of perfection. By giving myself permission to start before I feel ready and really leaning into that growth mindset, I've been able to chase and catch so many more dreams than I ever could have imagined. Receiving feedback of any kind used to be the worst for me as a perfectionist. I can't tell you how many times even the most minor, well-intentioned suggestions would just completely demoralize me. I'd get so defensive and wallow in feelings of inadequacy. There was this one instance in particular that was so painful. A trusted mentor gave me constructive notes on a huge presentation I was preparing for. But instead of seeing it as an opportunity to elevate my work even further, I just focused on how it made me feel. I got defensive, pushed back, and even snapped with some attitude, totally unable to separate his feedback from how I saw myself and my abilities. That was such a wake-up call for me. I realized that if I was going to keep growing and achieving at a high level, I desperately needed to overhaul my relationship to criticism and my definition of failure. A key mindset shift was removing the focus from me and back on the impact I was trying to make with my work. If there was a way I could show up and be more effective, I actually wanted to know that. Criticism isn't an insult, it's a navigator. I also had to embrace the idea that there's no such thing as an absolute failure, just data points that can help me course correct for next time. Feedback shouldn't be this devastating judgment, but an opportunity to keep adapting and improving my process over time. Developing that growth mindset has been huge. It allowed me to start viewing criticism as a gift rather than something to be defensive about. Living with perfectionist ideas is a lifelong journey without a true final destination. It's an ongoing practice of noticing your tendencies with radical self-awareness, then consciously realigning with healthier perspectives. My deepest wish is that this is the first step towards loosening the grip of perfectionism from your life. Join me in replacing it with a more sustainable, forgiving drive for growth. You've got this, one courageous step at a time.